how are you? Good to see you.
We'll hug like we haven't just been hanging out.
I know. Go ahead and have a seat. So,
hi, guys. Are you tired? No. Great. I just had a cookie, so I'm feeling great.
Yes, because there are milk bar cookies right after this. So you're standing between them and that cookie.
I'm so sorry. We'll rush through this.
No.
Everything sucks. Inequality is everywhere. We're good? You guys can get your cookies. Great.
So let's talk about sort of, right now your interests are around education and criminal justice reform. And how did you get to these issues being so important for you?
Oh, I thought you were going to say being so white.
Yeah.
Which, I basically just played a role on film for being as white as I am. It's an asset that I used against itself, which was the goal. Okay, so I come to all of this work from a place of incredible good fortune. I was born into an environment where my parents really cared about my education, invested in my education, encouraged me to pursue my education even after announcing to them at 3 that I was going to be an actress. They were like, you have to graduate from college first, or it's certain death at some point. It'll just turn out terribly. And so they encouraged me to go to college. They sent me to college. They paid my way. It was something that really mattered to them, and I was so lucky and had an incredible education across the board. And the entire time, the school that I grew up going to was where Horizons National, which we'll talk about a little bit more, was born. And so I was in school with kids who were also part of the Horizons program. It was just part of my life. My mom runs the board. And I always had this sense of gratitude for the quality of education that I was getting. And my parents never allowed me to be complacent or to feel like I in any way just deserved what I was getting. It all had to do with kind of, what are you going to give back to compensate and offset this unusual amount of good fortune you've been given? And when I look around the world and the country more specifically, and when I think about the things that feel like just sort of alarmingly insufficient, I guess I would say, it all kind of boils down to the fact that we don't educate all of our kids the same way. And a lot of people on the surface would be like, well, of course I don't support that. I mean, it's hard to get someone that's like, it's easy to get people to say like pro-education, like, yeah, all kids should be really well educated. It's very hard to find someone that will out loud say, actually, there are some kids I don't like and I would like them to be poorly educated. However, there are a lot of people that if you ask them honestly, do you think your white son in Greenwich, Connecticut should have the same education as a black son in St. Louis, Missouri? They would say yes out loud, but I don't know that that's how they genuinely feel. And so it started to really start to feel imperative for the conversation about a lot of these issues just boil down to the ugly things at their fundamental core, address those things, and everything else gets simpler. Like the entire criminal justice system is just racist. And so as soon as people kind of start to think about that and actually confront it, solving it becomes really simple, because it's like, well, is this what you would do with your own child? The sentences that you're imposing, these draconian mandatory minimums, is this what you would want for your own kid? So it all kind of stems from a point of gratitude and feeling like I'm paying off this credit that I've had since I was born into this great situation. I feel like I'll spend the rest of my life working towards having leveled out in some way to what good luck I've had so far.
So you talk about that in terms of growing up. One of the questions here is that, has there been any roles that you played that have really influenced that as well? Obviously.
I think Get Out, I mean, I think Get Out was in many ways, it was just such a gift. First of all, Jordan Peele is so brilliant that he literally could have, I mean, come on. He deserves actual brilliant, actual genius, no hesitation using those terms. If he had called me to ask me to be at the cocktail party, I would have been like, yes, absolutely. I mean, I would have done anything he asked me to do, but the fact that he wanted me to play Rose was exactly what I was looking for in that moment. I was looking to escape the Marnie that is just in every strand of this seersucker suit, which I'm not like, I understand that I'm not like helping it, but I'm hoping that it just looked, whatever, I just wanted to wear this suit. The point is, I was finding that very hard to shake. I'm a girl from Connecticut, it's just in my DNA. So I was like, how do I deploy that against itself? And then Jordan says, I need you to be the most secretly evil, sorry, spoiler alert, but whatever, get your life, just know that by now. The most secretly evil white girl ever known to man with no redeeming qualities, no excusable behavior whatsoever. And I was like, that is exactly what I want to do right now.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Sign me up.
And I was getting so frustrated watching people talk around these issues, talk around criminal justice reform, around education, working with Horizons, looking at these kids who get just completely subpar education during the school year. And in the summer when they have a good atmosphere for learning, they just take off and they shine and they go on to do whatever it is they want to do because they've been told repeatedly they can't, and then every summer they're told, don't listen to those people, you can do it. I just was like, okay, there has to be a different way to get into people's minds. There has to be a way to inception this conversation into people's brains. And then Jordan wrote this script and made this movie, and it felt like, okay, you could maybe think this is just a horror movie and go see it, and then accidentally do some thinking, which is the goal. Or you could go in knowing everything you know about it, and then hopefully, I always told people to go see it before dinner with friends so that you could talk about it, because it bears deconstructing. And I just 2 days ago got a text from a friend of mine whose family is half black, half black from the US and half Puerto Rican, and they were talking about the very complicated dynamics therein. And so it's really across the board, like the way it affected people, the way it created conversation. That's awesome. But then now it's time, and this is where I just love my generation so much. Millennials are like, we can talk till we're blue in the face, but we're the action generation. We feel like there's no time for chatter. We grew up with Twitter. It's great. We love talking to each other, but we also love getting shit done. And that's where I'm kind of impatient to like move into that zone where everyone feels empowered by information and a deep sense of purpose to start acting on behalf of the things that really matter to them.
So you mentioned Horizons.
Yes.
Tell us about Horizons.
Okay, so Horizons addresses the summer slide. How many of you have heard of the summer slide? Do you know what it is? Oh, bless all of you. I'm telling you, this generation is my dream. Yes, you are. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the summer slide is a phenomenon that is an effect really sort of disproportionately felt by kids from low-income families or from families that speak English as a second language. When they go home over the summer, they tend to lose progress in their learning in math and reading, and then they enter their fall semester behind. And it's cumulative, which is the horrible part. There's no system in place for them to catch up before the semester starts. They are far behind their peers who get to go to fancy summer camps or are at home with people who are playing, making them do all kinds of things to continue to learn. Schools kind of assume that you continue to learn over the course of the summer. And if you have one working parent or you live with your grandparents or whatever the circumstances are, there's just so many worlds in which that is not a reality. And it's just based on this totally fantastic ideal of what the American family does during the summer. And so what Horizon says is, okay, all you need to prove to us is that you qualify for a free and reduced lunch. And you're in. We're limited by attendance, but basically, because we want there to be a pretty close ratio between teachers and students, but the kids come back every year for about 6 weeks, every summer. We take over some fancy, beautiful private school campus, and we invade it with teachers from public, private, charter, all kinds of schools, and kids typically from the public school system. And they do a mixture of learning and exploring. And I've brought Horizons kids to the Facebook offices, and they were just like grabbing snacks and walking around like it was no big deal. And I was like, I have friends from college that would kill to be on the Facebook office right now. We have a program on the MIT campus, and then you have a bunch of like kindergartners just walking around MIT like it's nothing, which just realigns their expectations for what their life can look like. Even if they don't see an example in front of them of what they want, what's on the horizon for them, they can start to imagine it, and they realize that there's no real barrier standing in the way other than the ones that other people have erected. But if you don't have them for yourself, if you're not limiting what you imagine yourself capable of, these are the adults that are going to help you do it. We're going to give you the tools that you need, but we're going to encourage you to dream as big as any kid anywhere would. And the results are amazing. And the first way that people realize that is everyone learns how to swim. Everyone, because it's a safety thing, also it's a huge cause of death in the country, but also it's a socioeconomic thing. If you don't have access to a school or to a pool, you often don't learn how to swim. And so you see these little kids, they're terrified. They don't know anyone that can swim. They're looking at the water and they just feel like it's this big thing they've been told to avoid. It could kill them. And then they get in the water with like wings, a kickboard, a noodle. They're like, they look like a superhero. And they get in the pool, and then slowly flotation device by flotation device gets pulled away. And then by, third grade, they're like fish in the water, and they're so comfortable. And it just plants this seed in their mind of like, I used to think that was impossible, and I was little. And also, while I was still little, I conquered that, and now I'm a lifeguard during the summer. What else can I do that I thought was impossible? That wasn't so hard, and now it's just a part of my life. And now I don't have to be scared of it, and I can teach other people how to do it. So that's the first instance of it they learn, and the results are amazing. And you need to cut me off because I will literally talk about Horizons.
She said, I'm going to talk about Horizons.
I did. When we had lunch recently, and I was like, you need to cut me off, maybe physically, from stopping. Sorry, this is very loud. I hope that doesn't.
That's okay. All right, so top voted question here. You ready?
No, but let's do it.
We're going to do it. If you had the chance to chat with Betsy DeVos.
Oh my giddy goud.
What would you tell her?
Oh my God. It's funny because yesterday I was asked in an interview, like, okay, you're Secretary of Education. What are the 3 things you do? And I was like, but I'm not. And oh my God, what would I tell? What one thing? I would just say, like, you have every person in this country who has one, their most precious thing in their lives, future in your hand, which is a run-on, and it's a terribly constructed sentence, but I don't think it would matter. I'm gonna regret that. I'm gonna regret that.
You're like, it's
just
who's
us
back
here,
there
right?
listening. Exactly. There's
Listen.
nobody online. There's
Listen.
no one online.
I just need to know that that job is being performed based solely on a desire for the well-being of as many, and I mean, ideally all American children.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it at that.
Good. All right. Well, we can come back if we need
shit.
to.
Oh, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah. So you talk about, obviously there's 80 million millennials. What can millennials actually do about education? Is there a role that any of us should be playing right now?
Well, the first thing I always say to people is know about it. Like literally, like just know about it. I wrote the former First Lady, may she reign forever in our hearts, which she does. I wrote her a letter just telling her about Horizons. I was like, I'm not asking you for anything at all. There's no ask at the end of this letter. Like, hey, how are you? Okay, quick question. I just wanted to ask. There's no part of this. I just want you to know that it exists so that when you hear about it or when you think about summer learning loss, you might think of us. So the first thing I would ask is just know about it. Think about your own education. Think about the path that you took. Think about if it's one that you want other kids to take. If it isn't, if you think that you had to work against the odds, which is the opposite of what the system is set up for, you beat the odds, you worked up and out of the education you had. How did you do it? What were the resources you had? Was it an advisor that was particularly attentive? Think about the people in your life who might be having kids and what their options for education are. It's basically, education is one of those areas where the people doing policy seem so beyond our reach that one of the things I love about Horizons is that it operates without the man. It just works on its own. If we get state funding, great. And I bug people on the state level all the time asking for funding, or just like, literally just like write a check directly to summer learning loss preventative programs, because there's so much red tape and it drives me crazy. So I'm obsessed with programs that work outside of the sort of larger structures at work. Horizons is like, this is a problem, we can't seem to fix it nationally, we're just gonna do it on our own on a grassroots level. So look around your communities. We have a lot of Horizons programs in the greater DC area. Just saying, you can go to our website, horizonsnational.org. But more urgently, in July, I'm doing something I did last year, which was the 10 Days of Giving. Every day on my social media, I upload a video with me and my incredible co-star and dog, Moxie, in doing these stupid little videos to promote these products that I've bullied companies into donating to me. And then we sell the products, and all the proceeds go to Horizons. So if you want to donate to the kids who need it a lot and do incredible things, then buy all sorts of things when I post them on my social media in July. But there's a lot you can do. I mean, I don't know, like in terms of action item.
Well, talk about Edify.
Well, okay, so I am working, and this is more long-term, I'm working on a documentary series with Now This, which produces like a lot of the media you see on Facebook, whether you realize it or not, but you guys are millennials, so you definitely realize it. We notice things.
Yeah.
So Edify is this project I've been working on for a long time. It's basically gonna give us a detailed snapshot of the American education right now. And what we're looking for exclusively are people who are working outside of, around, underneath, over the system, and are fixing things because they see problems and they can't deal with it. And so we're gonna be going all over the country focusing on people who are just problem solvers. They see a problem, they fix it. They don't need to pass legislation, they don't need government funding. They're just doing this out of the goodness of their hearts and because they see inequity and they can't deal with it. And so that is something I'm working on. And the goal of it is to be able to show replicatable models for all of you guys who might wanna solve this insane problem of education, or at least help improve the educational landscape in our country. We'll give you guys ways to replicate it for yourselves or places to go to try to figure out how you can support one of these systems in your area. Because one of the things that I'm most bothered by in sort of call to action, documentary series or whatever, is that sinking feeling of like, oh, I guess we're just screwed and there's nothing I can do about it. But the thing about education is that every day that goes by is a day that's too late. It's just, these are human lives, human futures that we're talking about. It's not like we can put this off to the next administration. Like tomorrow, kids need to have something to do during the summer. And when they go back to school this fall, they need to have great learning experiences. And so the urgency of it is something that I think will, and does appeal to millennial audiences. And Now This educational content does really well among millennials. And that speaks so highly to this generation. People talk such shit about us. What is up with that? It's so weird. Anyway, sorry, that's how my brain works.
Well, so we're going to finish on the education because I want to talk to you about criminal justice.
Yes.
Piece. But this is an interesting question. If you have children, would you send them to public school? Why or why not?
I think about this a lot. You know, when I used to think about what I pictured my life being, I was like, well, I want my kids to go, my hypothetical future children, as I call them, which is really intimate and cute. I always picture them going to the private school that I went to in New Canaan Country, the New Canaan Country School in New Canaan, Connecticut, because of it's where Horizons was started, because of the fact that Horizons kids are part of the fabric, and because of the fact that I would basically want to develop an entire system where like pretty much half the school population, I love taking money from wealthy people, and I would want to just take all the money from the wealthy parents at NCCS and then make sure that half the student population could be kids who can't afford to be there and be there on scholarship. I lately have been thinking that it seems totally hypocritical for someone who cares as much about education as I do to send their kids to private school. It's something that I'm gonna have to continue thinking about. But one of the things that I think about constantly is the idea, and actually the town I grew up in has a really good school system, but that statement is one that I think about constantly, that my mom actually pointed out to me. She was like, we talk about good and bad schools. Does that imply that there are good and bad kids? There are just kids who deserve bad schools and it's okay for them, but it's not good enough for other kids? And that's something that is just part of the lexicon of the way people describe, oh, we moved to another county because our schools were bad and now they're better. It's like, well, what happened to that school when you moved away? And so those issues are things I have not made up my mind about. I'm gonna continue thinking. And if I can't make my like fantasy land of half a population that's on financial aid, more than half ideally, okay, like the whole population, then I don't think it would be right, but we'll see.
So criminal justice reform, why?
God, every reason. It's something that I had been raised to be pretty aware of. As I was saying earlier, my parents were kind of obsessed. They're very biased against rich kids, and the horror of realizing that the fruits of their success meant that they'd have rich kids living in their house was like terrifying for them. They were like, they're gonna be assholes and they're gonna beat us up. They're gonna have like cool Corvettes and like be mean to us and get the girl at the end of the movie. So they basically tried to raise us, with constant reminders of how lucky we were and not to take any of it for granted, always working, and always saving our own money, having a good sense of like, that you get what you work for, and work ethic is the most important thing in the world. And so one of the other byproducts of that was basically teaching us how lucky we were outside of that, the fact that we were just white kids born in Connecticut in this atmosphere that just set us up for success, where it'd be much weirder if my brother and I had failed, because the whole system is just ready to help propel us to the top. There are kids born into circumstances that the whole system is just sitting on top of them, and the much harder path is to break through it. And because they emphasized that was something that my grandparents talked to me about as well. It was just a part of the ethos of our family. And when I was in 9th grade, there were these like expanded studies classes offered, and one of them I remember was marine biology, which was basically just like a trip to Florida to just go on the beach. But I chose, there was a trip that went through the civil rights landmarks in the South, and that was the trip that I chose. And it was so formative, because there I am, a freshman in high school, and I'm driving through Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till was killed, and I'm seeing these lands, and I'm going to this town that I think of all the time, which is called Glendora, Mississippi, which is still the poorest place I've ever seen in the US. And it just changes the way you think about all of these issues, because it really just, there's something about the South that just strips away the last like 150 years, and you're just suddenly back there. And it's so powerful and upsetting. And the other incredible byproduct of that experience for me was that I was a racial minority in a lot of those towns for the first time in my life. I'd always been in white spaces, and for the first time in my life, I was in a place where I was one of the only white people around. And having that experience and then leaving that experience was a really profound thing that our teacher at the time encouraged us to think about. And so it was just this sort of awakening that happened to me then and kind of stayed with me. But in the last couple of years, my anger at the extent to which we are willing to just waste people's lives has kind of boiled over to the point where I don't know how else that people justify the way the criminal justice system works if they're not willing to just admit that there's some belief they have deep down that there are certain people that are just worth it and certain people that are just not. And so when I go inside prisons, when I talk to people, I just feel waste. When people ask me how was it, it just feels like a waste. It feels like people who have worked so hard to improve themselves, to get degrees, to survive in an atmosphere that is so punishing, and have been held accountable for one of, if not the worst choice they ever made in their life, and are asked to pay the price for it for their entire lives, especially when it doesn't work. Like, it'd be one thing if the criminal justice system and mass incarceration worked. We'd be the safest country in the world. It would be a really happy day. It doesn't work, so what are we doing? How else do you justify what we do with people who cause harm and do wrong? So just thinking about these issues, trying to talk to people about it, trying to figure out how to help, that hasn't been obvious to me yet. I don't want to stick my nose where it doesn't belong. This isn't my fight. These are all learned experiences that I'm trying to listen and read and watch and observe with my own two eyes, and compensate for the fact that I've had no relationship with the criminal justice system myself. It feels like a battle that isn't technically mine, but that I want to help with badly. Finding my place in that, and while being respectful for the people that have already been fighting this fight for years before I decided to take it on. But my suspicion is that, again, it's just about people starting to think about it, asking themselves, yeah, why are our prisons so far out of the way? Or, why is bail a thing? Doesn't that feel unconstitutional? Asking yourselves about the foundations of what this system is built on, and it just cracks immediately. Once you start like tapping on it, it just falls apart. And all that's left is bias. Because if we actually were interested in having any kind of satisfaction for the victim of a crime or the family of a victim of a crime, it would look very different, the way it looks all over the world. But for some reason, AKA what else sets America apart from the rest of the world historically, this is the system that we're obsessed with. So it's just such a fucking mess. But luckily there are people like Brian Stevenson, like Danielle Sered. There are people far, far smarter than I am that are working on this. And I'm of service and I'm ready to help.
Well, so you've got this incredible platform. One of the top questions is around what happened at MTV Movie Award, or the MTV Awards. But the question here is around how can you, as a privileged white woman, fight against stereotypes and perpetuating them? Do you regret any of those kinds of things? But primarily using your platform, how do you want to use that?
Yeah, well, the MTV thing, I would love to talk about, but I'm not supposed to. So there's that. That's why I haven't talked about it yet. But I think you at least hopefully can tell that I'm pretty candid and will answer things. The idea that I fight against the most is how to help without overstepping my boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And that's basically what that question is about, is like, how are you helping by making light of something like that? And so I'm still learning. I didn't come out like fully baked, ready to have the megaphone that just gets handed to people in my job. It's this really weird privilege that you can use for good or bad. You can use in different ways. And it's kind of like, I'm not like fully baked yet. I don't know, which is why I've spent so long learning, listening, trying to figure out how to help, because the stakes are high. When you put yourself out there to help, inevitably there's room for error. But my intentions are really pure, and if I fuck up along the way, I'm really sorry. But I just want our country to operate for everyone who lives in it, and not just the people who other people picture when they describe the, again, part of making America great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's how I would describe it. My platform, I still am really careful about. A lot of the work I do, you guys will never see and I'll never talk about, because one of the things I've figured out, since this isn't my fight, and since it's a fight I'm helping with that isn't technically mine to fight, a lot of my work is done behind the scenes, using my privilege to get into rooms that I can get into, trying to bully people into doing things for good. Trying to leverage stuff, getting donations for Horizons by leveraging, social media, whatever it is. A lot of it is done in the quiet, and that's because, I don't know, I just think I'm more comfortable working that way. And it's why I'm not like, it feels weird. Like, I'm not gonna like Instagram story and going to Angola prison, which was an insanely intense, I was there last week. It was incredibly intense, but it just doesn't feel right to put it on social media. It feels too important.
Yeah,
somehow.
I think that people often see the other stuff and not actually see the things behind the scene.
Well, my hope is that the other stuff lures people in,
Exactly.
and then the Get Out, and then they'll go see Get Out and actually do some thinking. I'm much more comfortable with Jordan Peele's ability to address these issues than my own. So I'll just use cute pictures of Moxie or like my dress from the Met Gala, and then I'll promote Get Out, and then they'll talk to Jordan.
Excellent. I like this the strategy.
Yeah, that's how my life works. I plan everything and it goes perfectly. Nope.
So, well, the question is, and you kind of touched on this, was just talking about race and privilege. Does it make you uncomfortable?
Talking about it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, but it should. I mean, the way to not feel comfortable is to not talk about it. So, I mean, for someone who historically, like a white, wealthy girl, we were never meant to feel uncomfortable. We could like swoon, and everyone would like put us on a fainting couch.
I remember my parents doing the same thing. They're like, be comfortable all the time.
Yeah, totally be comfortable. So for us to feel uncomfortable is like definitely a step in the right direction. It means the mic is being passed to other people, which is great. And that's why it's so much more my job to feel uncomfortable, but to be listening and to be receptive and to learn and to be on the other side of a conversation, not explaining things to people who already know what I'm talking about, who know more about what I'm talking about than I do, which is why things like this, like I'm positive everyone here knows more about what I'm talking about than I do, which is weird, but we're here, so I'll talk about it. But that's the thing, is like the idea of being uncomfortable talking about, I mean, they're horrible things to have that we have to talk about, but we have to talk about them. So tough, I'm fucking uncomfortable, who cares? No one's cared about the fact that the rest of the country has had to be fluent in how to live in a white world all this time, and has had to be comfortable code switching between atmospheres and worlds. Like, it's definitely time for us to take that on.
Yeah. So I'm particularly interested in this one because I have two little lovely ladies at
Yes,
home.
you do.
Yes, Paige and Blair. So the question is around how
Good
are
names,
you,
right?
Exactly. How are you acting as a role model for young girls and women who want a career even in acting, or just, because it's a tough and ugly industry where image is everything.
Oh man, oh my gosh, that condensation really just, I did not, when I stand up, I didn't pee myself, although I am having fun. Man, it's complicated. I mean, I think that's where my parents' insistence on my graduating from college really helped. It wasn't so much about the intellectual pursuit of it all, but because they knew that I was going to be like a learning person. I think it was more about just staying in the oven and baking longer, because they knew that there's this weird sort of mindset bandied about the industry that you stall developmentally at the age that you become famous, which if you think about it and apply to some people that you see, it's a little bit true because your life ceases to evolve in a normal way. But because I was 23 or 4 when Girls went on the air, and because it was kind of a slow build and I wasn't like dashing around New York in disguises, trying not to be paparazzi. Like, my life is still really quiet and private for the most part. And to the extent that it isn't, like, I totally understand the contract of being in this world. It's weird, but it's nothing to complain about. It's amazing. I get to do my favorite thing in the world for a living, which is crazy. And I feel lucky for it every single day. People telling me I'm too thin, I don't like the blonde hair, I don't, whatever. It's like, yeah, that doesn't feel great, and I see it, and it hurts my feelings. But again, okay. If that means that I get to do what I love for a living, and the things that I do get to be seen by people and talked about and taken seriously, and I get to divert attention away from my, like, I guess, alarmingly too skinny self onto things like Horizons, even better, you know? So that's kind of the trade-off. To complain about people talking about the way I look at this point would be so silly, because the answer to that is so obvious. It's just the way it is at this point. There's really no division. There's no such thing as the studio system anymore, where Universal would pay photographers to take a bunch of like candid photos of celebrities and then they'd send it out into the media. That's not the way it works anymore. So if that's the version of Hollywood you're fantasizing about, then this is not the world for you, because in success, this is what you're in for. And you can avoid it, you can try, but it just makes you even more elusive and alluring. My strategy, boring. Just be as boring as possible. My marriage, boring. Moxie, I mean, for us, it's not boring, but I want to make it.
Your husband's like.
Fine. No, my husband is the shit. He's awesome. But we wanted to make it like as uninteresting to other people as possible. And to our credit in this mission, when we started dating, the page 6 headline was "A Logical Couple." So no nicknames needed here. We're good just being logical and uninteresting to the rest of you. And so that's always like, I've grown up because my dad's in media. I grew up around actors and actresses, and I'd always bug them with questions like, how do you deal with it? And they basically said it's kind of a two-way street. Sometimes it isn't, but usually it is. If you give a little, if you ever alert, paparazzi that you are somewhere, which by the way happens all the time. I don't know why or how. I don't know. If I had like a paparazzo's phone number on my phone, that would be horrifying. But a lot of these things get kind of like planned, and then it's like, well, I'm trying to have lunch with my friends, like, don't bother me. But it's totally a two-way street.
Yeah.
And so if one of your little girls wanted to be an actor, I mean, I do this all the time. People send their children to me when they express interest in being an actor. And what
For like the weekend?
I would love that.
Okay.
It's usually just like a coffee.
Okay.
But I always tell them to go to college first. And yeah, there's actually this little girl named Rosa who's an aspiring actress who was in this HBO documentary, Class Divide, which I watched. It's about West Chelsea in New York City, and I watched the documentary and I saw this person. And if you see this documentary, you will immediately know, even if you don't remember the name of the person I'm talking about, you will know when you see her on screen, because she is like, she has this otherworldly quality about her.
Yeah.
And so I watched the documentary and I used my privilege to get to know her, because I was like, I want to help you in your pursuit, to being, I could tell she wanted to be a star. And I was like, I wasn't like, let me help you be a star. I was basically like, let me beg you to slow down, because you are so spectacular that do all the things you want to do. She said, I want to be a geologist, and then she also writes music for herself. And it's this sweet, innocent little girl sense of wanting it all at the same time. Yeah. And basically I see that and I want to encourage her to move slowly. But so yeah, I always just tell people, slow down. It's sort of like that Vienna song by Billy Joel, slow down, you crazy child. It's like, I used to have that, very, very nerdy to admit, had that written in my journal, because every day I'd wake up and be like, today I need to learn Spanish and Chinese, and then I need to learn how to play the violin. And it was just sort of an urging me to like allow yourself to be the age you are.
Yeah.
Because you never get to, I mean, the obvious point, but an important one, you never get to be that age again.
So we're incredibly over on time because I allowed it.
Yes, way over on time.
Sorry, but last final question, which is, any advice for millennials that are listening to this?
About anything?
It's up to you.
Oh boy. Subscribe to newsletters for causes you care about. Read them, don't just file them away. Read them, they'll keep you up to speed on things. I'm a big Marshall Project fan, follower. I love their newsletter. I feel like it is news that I'm not always getting elsewhere. Things change every day. And millennials don't need to be told to stay aware. But even in areas that you don't think you might get all the news already, try to find those newsletters and get that news anyway, so that you can keep your eye on the ball. Brush your teeth at night. Take off all your makeup. Don't dye your hair blonde. That's all I got.
That's great. Thank you.